Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week featured our 8th and final Champions League Phase match at Girona, I guess we'll talk about that, and a home match against Manchester City. How you doing, Keith?
Dove, am I right that you are in the, as I don't understand it, the second happiest place on Earth? the happiest, of course, being the happiest being the Emirates yesterday.
Yes,
we're recording on a Monday, unlike usual, but
yes, I can confirm. Yes, although in our room, it was certainly the happiest place on Earth as we rewatched the replay this morning. So yeah,
yeah, I'm just gonna have a big Joker grin on my face most of the game today, so we're gonna enjoy this one for a bit.
Yeah, so this was an interesting week, and interesting week's mandate that we break from format a little bit. We're going to talk about the City match first this week, and let's get right to it because it's probably going to take us a while. So the first thing anybody will have noticed who watched this match, or even the highlights of this match, was, hey, we saw Miles Lewis-Skelly playing. He wasn't supposed to play yesterday. What happened there?
Justice was done. So we mentioned last week Arsenal was likely to and did, in fact, appeal the decision, at least in terms of the suspension. I have to say, I don't remember reading if the red card is officially wiped from his record, insofar as, like, we talk about the accumulation of cards dealing with suspensions, but I suspect it might be the case because he was awarded, because the straight red for violent conduct, that's the official ruling, comes with a 3-game suspension. That's what Arsenal appealed, was the 3-game suspension, and there was a panel. I understand that they're former players who are on the panel, and they apparently unanimously decided that the play did not merit the charge of violent conduct, and so as a result, the 3-game suspension was wiped out. Shortly after that, the PGMOL then fined Arsenal for, I forget what the term is, but basically for the players surrounding the referee after the card was given, failing to control the team or some such like that. I mean, the real answer, and we went kind of long on this last time, the real answer to that at this point is just, you know what, just write the check and just move on. You know, we've talked about that sort of the long-term implications of the long-term instincts of the season and how we feel about these things, and the idea of how things are piling up. It feels as though things are piling up against us. I do think, all things considered, in much as we criticize Michael Oliver, and to a large extent deserves it, VAR really sort of messed up on this one because they needed to look at what he said, look at what the call he made, and be able to say there was a problem, and that shouldn't have been the case. But at this point, the best we can do is the suspension was lifted, and so Lewis-Skelly was back for the City game this weekend. He'll be back for Newcastle this week, and played against Girona on midweek as well.
So we're continuing our trend of at least one match every week, scoring in the second minute. I'd like to see that continue.
Yeah, this one started out pretty well. Jumped out to a really good lead. We were putting a lot of pressure on them early. I have to say, when I saw the lineup coming out, there was a lot of conversation, especially after his goal midweek, that you'd probably see Wanyeri on the field.
Right.
And so having Trossard and Martinelli as the wings, I think Martinelli in particular is a little bit more defensively responsible, and part of that's just Wanyeri being 18. And so I was wondering if we'd see perhaps a slightly more conservative approach from Arsenal in this game, as we've sort of seen in the past, being very cagey against City. But I think the way we played, we were willing to be very aggressive with the press, and I think that makes sense in part because the City defenders have been very shaky. City has some strength on the wings, but in the middle of the field, they've been kind of a mess this year, and we went right after them, and Akanji gets his pocket picked by Trossard. Rice one touch to Havertz. Havertz squares it, and Odegaard finishes it, and 1-0 to the Arsenal, just like that.
Yeah, that was Odegaard's first goal in a while. Was that his first Premier League goal of the season? Or certainly in a while.
I don't remember if they said that. He did have one fairly recently. Was it last week? He had one fairly recently as well. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we talked about getting scoring from the midfield and how so much of what we haven't gotten this season, we talk about not scoring goals and where we're struggling. We've talked about getting goals or not getting goals from the midfield and how that's kind of taken a chunk out of our offense. And so it was good to see Odegaard get on the board, and just good to see us get on the board as well, because we talk about how goals change games. We're definitely, when we can score quickly like that, it puts us on the front foot in so many ways. And I think, and we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show, I feel like the game was really played in sort of 3 different segments, and that was kind of a key part of that first segment, which I would say probably ran us to about the first, I don't know, maybe half hour or so, where we were dominant. We were on the front foot, and it was our game to lose. And I thought we did very well, and then culminated with Havertz's chance there at the top of the box, and oh dearie dear.
Yeah, that didn't. It looked like this was going to be a match in the same vein as a lot of our recent ones, with frustrating chances that we squander. That's what it felt like at that moment.
I do think with Stones coming back, I think it was Stones who came back and planted himself there on the goal line. With the defender coming back, I think it kind of spooked Havertz a little bit. He's trying to curl it wide and just doesn't really get a lot of bend on the ball, and so it ends up just rolling harmlessly away. I mean, we were talking about, the group of us were talking about this at halftime. I wondered if, a goal there to go 2-0 up on City in their current incarnation, I don't want to say it would have been game over at that point. I certainly, in retrospect, obviously seeing how the rest of the game played out, it does feel like you could have approached that and said, man, that could have been game over. It really could have been at that point to be 2-0 up, a City side that's struggling. I mean, I remember watching them back, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend, and they kind of got taken apart by Liverpool. In some ways, it sort of felt a little bit like that too. Like they've done so much over the last decade to raise the level of what it takes to be a championship side. However legitimate you think about that, 115 charges, et cetera, but they've done so much to raise that level, and Liverpool and Arsenal have done so much to chase them, right? That the fact that City has lost a little bit of that edge, I mean, right now Liverpool and Arsenal are just in kind of a different category than they are, which is it's really weird, but obviously wound up being a lot of fun. At least it feels that way. But then we enter that second segment, and City got themselves back into the game.
Well, yeah. So the rest of the first half was pretty quiet, and into about 10 minutes into the first half, it was kind of seeming that way. But yeah, there was a bit of a defensive breakdown on our part, and I think I wasn't totally sure. I couldn't totally catch who it was. I thought it was Savinho, but there was a nice cross into the box, and Erling Haaland with his lofty head was there, ready to catapult it into the back of the net.
Yeah. I mean, it seems weird to say, because you look back at this and, oh, wow, who had a bad game for Arsenal? I watched the highlight package just before we came on. Actually, I feel like Saliba was kind of on the wrong end of a lot of awkward plays in this one, including this one, and he just gets beat by Haaland. And Saliba's had some really good games against Haaland. I'm not going to, obviously we know his quality. I'm not going to go crazy about his performance overall, but I think he's a guy who's going to come out of that game saying, I should have done better overall. And that one in particular, he had another instance in the first half. They had, this wasn't on Saliba, but they had that one off the corner that kind of hit the crossbar and just missed Haaland's head. It's frustrating. Haaland took so much of the attention coming into this. Of course, his antics, shall we say, in the aftermath of the draw up at Manchester back in September.
Well, why don't you, for anyone who, like myself, who didn't remember that as clearly, why don't you remind everyone?
Okay, no, that's fair. So there are really two instances right at the end. Of course, he and Gabriel were going at it all game, and Haaland is a big physical guy. Gabriel is a big physical guy. I mean, Saliba is a big, strong player and certainly doesn't mind getting physical. But Gabby's Gabby's more of a player, seems to love getting into it, like using his body, being more physical. And they were going at it most of the game, and then at the very end, when City scored to steal the draw in stoppage time, there's Haaland picks up the ball out of the net and kind of pings it off Gabriel's head, which, I mean, frankly, is the most objectionable thing that happens in the whole sequence. Like I'm not saying like he's going to give him a concussion or anything stupid like that, but it's just kind of it's just such a like. It's just so. It is kind of offensive, and they're like, "What are we doing?" And then after the game, shortly afterwards, when the final whistle blew, I don't know if he went up to or walking by Arteta, apparently told him, "quote Stay humble," which you may have seen a lot of references to humility and being humble during the course of the game, and that's what most of that was a reference to.
Yeah, and I don't know if I even totally get what he meant by that. Like, to stay in your place, like don't try and beat us because you won't. Is that kind of the gist
a little
of it?
bit? I mean, remember we've talked about this. You're talking about elite level athletes who are able to find like competitive motivation from anything, and so yeah, I mean, and there's apparently a point of the game yesterday where he was pointing at the Premier League badge on his shirt. There's of course being gold for having won the title. I mean, look, it's easy to get wound up a little bit by trash talk, but like everybody does it. It's one of the like it's sometimes it's a little frustrating to hear how people get sort of wound up by trash talk. It's like everybody does it. Your team does it. My team, everybody's team does it. All sorts of players do it. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the aftermath about Haaland as sort of the pantomime villain. Like he was the guy everyone was sort of targeting throughout the course of the game. And fair enough, and I'm not upset about it. I'm enjoying it. It is part of what makes this sort of thing fun. But yeah, there were a lot of references to that during the course of the game, some of which we'll get to as we go along. But yeah, of course, listen, if you're going to talk, you got to back it up. And even though he's not a player who does a lot, there were a lot of references like in the first half, he's only had 2 touches or hasn't touched the ball in 20 minutes. I mean, a lot of that is because that is just his game. He sits up top and sort of waits for the play to come to him. And since City was struggling with possession so much, especially in the early part of the first half, it makes sense he wouldn't have gotten a lot of play. But he got a chance and he buried it. And, it sort of came at a sequence, I thought, especially at the end of the first half, but even a little bit there in the second half. That was where I started to worry about the Arsenal we've seen in the last few weeks, or when we worry about them. We did look a little tired. I mean, Trossard looked exhausted. He was running. He was everywhere in the first half. I thought he had a really good, really active first half. But there were a couple times you almost like looked at him and you could almost see him like hands on his knees, just sucking wind, which is not really good right before halftime.
No. Ooh.
But he was. I mean, to his credit, he was all over the place in the first half.
Yeah.
And he's not normally a guy. We talk about his game. He's not a guy. I don't want to say he's not defensively responsible, but he's definitely not a guy who tracks back in the same way as a Martinelli or some others that we've talked about. But he was all over the field in the first half. But we did look, Odegaard sort of looked a little leggy. It looked like we were. I mean, I guess there was some concern, right? Is this sort of the same old thing? Is City a psychological block that we just can't seem to, even when we get over them, we can't seem to get over them?
Right.
Are we sitting back too much and letting them take the game to us? It's one thing to do that when you're down to 10 men and ahead, going defensive makes sense. It's another thing to do that when you're up and at home and you're potentially on the front foot. And we were kind of behind in that stretch there from, so we said about a half hour in the first half into, really until Haaland's goal. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little concerned. It did feel like a kind of game where we were going to have to hang on in this one, which isn't surprising, but would have been a little disappointing given City's relative quality this season. And then Thomas Partey just said, "No, we're not doing that."
Yeah, I mean, and what? I mean, they said the commentator said that in the stadium they were calling out to him, "Don't shoot."
Well, we talked about Partey. He's most likely to punt it into the second deck. But
right. And had it not been for, was it Stones' back?
Oh no! I think that's so. We'll say this because we've seen him do this once. I mean, he takes those shots, and we sort of live with him punting it, into rosette, as they say, because every couple of times, once or twice in a season, he just scores an absolute banger. Right? It just flies in perfectly. I think it was a Spurs game, and he is a player who raises his game in big moment, like who plays better against Tottenham, against City, against some of these bigger opponents. And I thought, and he was, we talk about Trossard being good. I thought Partey was immense in this game, and the goal, it was. I mean, the whole thing comes from he basically uses the referee as a shield, and Phil Foden, who is not as good as Saka, slides the ball in the field, and Partey just picks it off, and you're kind of he had that look like, I'm going to take this shot, and you're kind of nervous, then he takes the shot. I think it's probably headed on goal anyway. It obviously deflects off Stones.
Right, it deflected off his back. Thankfully, that ended up going well. Yeah, I think there's a chance if his back hadn't gotten in the way, maybe it would have gone into the opposite side of the goal. Yeah. It did look like it was on track, but it's tough when it deflects that early. It's kind of tough to tell. But
you'll notice it. Sorry.
No, it was a good shot nonetheless, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll notice on the score sheet, it is Partey's goal. It's not an own goal by Stones.
I did not notice that, so thank you.
Yeah, so the judgment call being made is that the ball was on target. It's only if the deflection sort of changes a ball that wouldn't otherwise have been on goal. And again, that is a bit of a judgment call, but
right.
I do think it did have that kind of look. And again, to come 2 minutes after Haaland scores, all of a sudden we're back in front.
It was a huge moment. And I mean, Partey, even before that in the match, had been having a really good match. He was the one intercepting so many of their passes, and it continued after the goal too. He was huge in this match.
I mean, yeah, and I picked a little bit on Saliba slightly, but I mean, there's so many players. I thought Raya was great in this game. Timber has very quietly been a very good player all season long. We don't talk about it as much because he's just so sort of calmly in that position. Obviously we'll talk a bit in a moment about Lewis-Skelly and sort of the game he had. Trossard, Martinelli kind of up and down the field. Kai Havertz keeps doing that thing where he gets himself into positions. Declan Rice was all over the place. I mean, it was so many players. Gabriel went head to head with Haaland all game long.
They were generally firing on all cylinders. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Partey's goal, I think, sort of took the handbrake off. We've talked about scoring goals, right? How sometimes it's about taking the shots and the confidence to take those shots, and we've sort of seen this with Arsenal sometimes, right? Where there are at times it feels almost like they lack the confidence to take the shot and want to make the pass instead. And I think Partey doing that. I'm not going to say that because Partey did that, everyone felt a little more freer, but I think Partey and then a few minutes later, Lewis-Skelly, that takes some guts to pick a body part. It takes some guts to dribble into the box the way he does, and he's looking for it, and he just leathers it in, and it's a great shot from a kid.
It was. And, I there is something to Partey's goal kind of opening the floodgates. And you hinted at maybe one aspect of it. It may have also been like the crowd you could hear went nuts, and it escalated with every successive goal we nailed in. They got louder and louder. And I don't remember ever hearing them that loud before. And that has to have an impact also.
Oh, yeah. I would say, I can't think. I'm trying to think, because we've had a few games where the crowd has definitely got me. I mean, I'm thinking we had Rice, his Arsenal goal, first Arsenal goal when against United, we scored late stoppage. And obviously the one we'll keep pointing to is Bournemouth and Reece Nelson, finishing off that comeback.
Right.
The Champions League, the shootout against Sporting last year in the knockout stages. I mean, you get some moments like that.
Those but notice were all very late in the game, whereas this happened early enough that it really could have had the kind of impact that leads to 3 more goals going in,
Yeah, and we've talked about this a bit, and I know because I've certainly watched a few games where teams I'm following have been on the other end of this kind of game where, in a sense, I mean, don't get me wrong, we were better than City throughout the game. Yeah, but anytime you get a massive score line like this, there's always a little bit of a sense of like the ball kind of the good variance. We talk about the bad variance and the bad luck plays we get. This is one of those where sometimes you just take shots and they just keep going in. Like you said, Partey takes that shot and all of a sudden it deflects off Stone's back and winds up, hitting the crossbar and bouncing out. Or Lewis-Skelly's the shot and the keeper gets his hand on it and not parries it away. Or Havertz whiffs on the net again. Like there's plenty. We've seen plenty of those moments, but sometimes, as they say, when you're hot, you're hot.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to feel it, and we took them apart. We
really did. So let's talk about Lewis-Skelly's goal a little bit more. I mean, so first of all, I thought it was amazing. This kid makes his debut against City, right? He then scores his first ever career professional goal, big boy goal against City, also in the reverse fixture. I mean, the same season. That was really something.
And if you recall, it was the City game where he had also picked up, before he gets his debut, he picks up his first yellow card for shouting something. I think it was someone said, I think it was to Raya to sit on the ball and time waste in the game. And apparently, again, your friend and mine, Erling Haaland, apparently said something like, "Who are you?" at him, which is kind of at that point is actually a fair criticism from a player like that. But you'll notice, of course, after the game, Lewis-Skelly scores. You'll notice the celebration.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I don't remember seeing that before.
It is a celebration.
Sitting down, meditating.
The meditating. Those are the lotus position.
Fingers, little finger loops on his knees, sitting cross-legged. Yeah,
that is a celebration done typically by one Erling Haaland.
That makes sense.
I told you he was the main. He's the main character in today's show.
Now I get it. Absolutely. Thank you for the context. That made no sense.
Which I have to say, in the moment I didn't. I just thought it was hilarious, and afterwards it was pointed out. I did the comment. I listened this morning to the Arscast, and the comment they threw in was like, "That means he planned it." Like, you don't just in the moment decide to do that. He came into the game almost saying to himself, if I get a chance, I'm going to shoot. And if I score, this is what I'm going to do. Which, again, there's a level of confidence there to sort of approach the game that way. It's interesting. We'll talk about Nwaneri more in a second. They're both 18. They're both sort of breaking into the first team at this point. Lewis-Skelly plays with, I guess I'd say the player he kind of reminds me of a little bit more is kind of a Ben White. Like, I'm going to do me. I'm going to be my guy. I'm not bothered by you or anything you say. I know I'm going to play my game and do my thing. And he's a very confident, he has swagger to his game.
Mm-hmm.
Nwaneri reminds me, I'm trying to think who would be compared. Almost more like an Odegaard. There's like a seriousness to him.
Right.
Like, I'm here, like, I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah,
it's very professional.
Yes.
And it's interesting, sort of, because we treat them as 18 and they're kids and they're kind of the same, but you get a sense of their personalities and how they sort of play into the club, or how they could potentially play into the club. Maybe Declan Rice is a little bit there. I mean, but Rice and Odegaard are both they're both fiery guys. We've seen Odegaard, waving to the crowd, and same with Rice. Nwaneri doesn't seem to do that same thing. But then again, maybe he doesn't feel the need to. But yeah, so for Lewis-Skelly to walk in with, to walk into the game thinking to yourself, if I score, as a defender, mind you. I mean, he came up as a midfielder, and he's been sort of playing, kind of come up in his last year or two as a left back. But he's so. Scoring goals isn't entirely foreign to him, but to come into the game as a left back, as a defender, and say, if I score, what do you mean if you score? No, if I score, I'm going to do this, and he did. And
that's funny. I mean, it's also possible that it's just in his personality that he would think of something like that, like, oh, you're going to give me a hard time earlier, you're going to talk like that to me. Well, I just showed you. And maybe it was off the cuff. Maybe just he's familiar enough with him. He thought that would be funny to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting how that stuff goes in, and it's there's a little bit of the game here. There's sort of the gamesmanship element of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the fun bit, and then we go from there. The third goal I think really takes a lot of the sting out of it because he went 2-1. There is we know there's that moment of danger, and all it takes is one breakdown. But for a few minutes later to get the ball to Havertz, who again, speaking of confidence players and having already had a pretty bad miss already in this game, punches it home. It's 4-1, and at that point, the route is on.
Yeah, and I mean, by the way, just talking about the build up to that goal, I mean, that pass from Partey to Martinelli initially, perfectly weighted, beautiful pass, puts Martinelli in perfect position to carry it up before he then makes the cross to Havertz. I mean, it was beautiful, just like exemplary play from all those guys involved. Amazing.
Yeah, and at that point, it's 4-1. I mean, at that point, we start olaying. I mean, we're just it's a walk in the park. But at that point, you do kind of want to really stick it to them. You want the phrase. Yeah. The phrase is you put them to the sword. Like
right.
No, there is no doubt. Leave no doubt about what's happening here today. And that brings us to Ethan Nwaneri, who I can't tell which goal this week was my favorite.
Yeah, really. Well, I mean, he continues his streak of Saka-like goals, right? Like where that's the type of shot that Saka would take with the same result, where he places it where he wants it to go from a similar position on that side, and yeah, he's doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, just sort of the build up to it, the passing that gets us there, and you can tell at that point City's kind of like, and I recognize this look because I know I've seen it on us a few times against them. Like you just want it to be over.
Yeah,
you're done. The game's over. You just want it to be over, and your opponent says, "No, when I'm finished." and just to hit 5-1 was just a. We have owed these guys a beating like this for a few years, and it was, I guess the word really, and you talk about the crowd, the word really to me is cathartic. Like it just felt good to just keep throwing those punches, and they'll look. We can take the big picture version of the season. Obviously, we are still 6 points behind Liverpool, which is kind of large because of course they won again this weekend. They still have a game in hand, which they'll get to next weekend when we're off. It still is going to take a lot to overhaul them, but given the sort of stretch we've come through, this 2 games a week stretch through January, I mean, you saw that stat in there at some point in the game, right? That we're unbeaten our last 14 Premier League games.
Yeah, with 5 draws, which is more than we'd like to see. But yeah.
I mean, everyone's talking about, how rough our stretch was in January. We lost 1 game. And that was the Newcastle game in the Carabao Cup. I mean, I know the United one feels like a loss because we lost the shootout, but officially that was a draw, so I'm counting it that way. But yeah, I mean, we've just been. Yeah, I mean, I think having Zagreb and Wolves and Girona, I mean, that first stretch we had, Brighton and Newcastle and United and Spurs. I mean, United and Spurs. Well, I think Spurs is better than their placement, but United's a mess. But, that's not an easy stretch to run through. No. And so I think to get a couple of games, like Dinamo Zagreb, even Wolves, we talk about the talent gap and Girona, to sort of build you into City. I mean, after that, then, I mean, we'll talk about the Newcastle game a little bit more once we wrap up the show, but that's the end of this stretch. 11 games in 5 weeks. I mean, that's bonkers, and we're about to come out of it and then get 10 days off because we got knocked out of the FA Cup. So, but yesterday felt really good. I hope you enjoyed that.
Oh, I did. And, it was great. I am on vacation this week. It was great watching that with family. So that's always nice when we can do that in person. So worth waiting a day to watch it. There's no way we're going to be able to watch it live. It's actually funny. I was at Hollywood Studios while the match was going on. it was like within a minute of kickoff, I was in a bathroom and I saw someone wearing a Phil Foden jersey. My first instinct was, oh, talk soccer. I was like, oh, wait, no. He's a City fan. No, last thing, because I'm thinking spoilers. I was like, oh, wait, no, actually, the game is just starting now, so he can't spoil anything. Well, as it turns out, if you're following it, he maybe could have spoiled that first goal.
Yeah, I mean, also, I guess I'd say it'd be fine if it's a Foden jersey. You could just laugh at him. If it was a Bernardo Silva jersey, you'd have to actually like spike him or something. So, yeah. Speaking of players who I can't believe were on the field, Silva, winds up with 0 cards in a game where he kicks Trossard on the field, but it's fine, again, letter of the law and all that.
Yeah, thankfully,
I'm not going to talk about the referee.
Need to talk about it this week. Yeah.
I'm not going to do. No, this isn't about the referee. This is about Bernardo Silva.
Yeah.
Anyway, 5-1, boys.
I will say, informally, walking around Disney World yesterday, it was funny noticing all the soccer jerseys. Who would you guess would be the most common team? And it was by a wide margin. I ended up seeing, well, I won't say yet, but I saw 1 or 2 from a few teams. There's one team that I saw at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 people wearing.
I mean, to me, the obvious answer, especially given I know you're in the state of Florida, is Inter Miami and mostly Messi.
I am specifically talking Premier League shirts, and I did see one Miami Messi jersey. I saw a Messi Argentina jersey, but if we're talking specifically Premier League.
Oh, interesting. Premier League. I don't want to drag this out because we do have other things to get to on the show. I am going to say... I'm going to say Haaland.
That would make sense. And even just generally Manchester City as a team would make sense. But no, that Phil Foden jersey was the only Manchester City jersey I saw. Okay. I saw one Arsenal jersey way late in the day. Mm-hmm. I saw at least 4 or 5 throughout the day Manchester United jerseys. Mm. I saw Garnacho. I don't remember the other players that I saw, but yeah, I know.
Really? I mean, I guess United has a giant fan base, but mostly from things they did at least a decade ago, if not longer. Interesting.
Yep. Huh. All right. So if we were to shift gears a little bit, so that was the City match. It was fun. We enjoyed it. There's not too much more to talk about there. We reveled a little bit. Moving along, as we record, today marks the end of the transfer window. It officially closed a few hours ago. So nothing ended up happening for Arsenal, at least, right?
Well, nothing incoming for Arsenal.
Okay.
The only thing we really almost. So there are 2 big stories that I recall coming out of this. The first we talked about, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, was Martin Zubimendi. Out of Real Sociedad, who it seems like we're in good. We're I guess we're in the pole position to sign him over the summer. Mm-hmm. But again, that's all unofficial at this point. There was a bid put in sometime during the week for Ollie Watkins, the striker from Aston Villa.
Right.
Not a crazy idea. A Premier League striker, so he has a lot of experience. He could slot right in. We know his quality. Also grew up an Arsenal fan, so certainly would not have been opposed to, suiting up in the red and white. Right. But Aston Villa has 2 strikers on the roster, Watkins and John Duran. Duran apparently signed for a whole bunch of money to go to Saudi Arabia. I think Al Nassr. I think it's the club with Cristiano Ronaldo. Either way. I mean, Villa brought in a few other offensive players as well, but they would not have let both Duran and Watkins go in the same window. That would have been silly. They are, I mean, obviously they're a bit behind us, but they are still in position in the Champions League. They got to buy into the round of 16 like we did. They are still very much in competition for European spots in the Premier League, so they're not going to sell both their strikers in January. Even though there's an argument made that frankly this is as good as it would get in terms of a market for Watkins, because I believe he's 29, so he's kind of on that. He's kind of at that point. The dreaded 30. But in terms of his, his worth as a player and the kind of money that people are going to shell out for him, this was probably their last chance for Villa's last chance to really cash in on him, but ended up not coming off. So it seems as if we're not going to bring anyone in.
Right, and from the demand side too for Arsenal, as far as like the crescendo of a fever pitch for we need a striker, just because of the lack of depth right now with all of our injuries on the front line. So yeah, that would help things.
Right, and striker is one of those things because you're talking about goals. Like if a striker's any good, his club needs him. Like,
Right.
you're either in competition, like you're Villa, you're in competition for European spots, or you're a club in another league in competition for European spots, or maybe you're trying to avoid relegation. He's the only good player you have. Like, teams are very reluctant to part with strikers especially at this phase of the season. So,
Right.
it was always a bit of a gamble, it was a bit of a long shot. Really more interesting are perhaps probably the guys going out, or more or less going out. Two outgoings of note. The first is an Arsenal youth player, Aiden Heaven, signed with Manchester United. I understand he was out of his contract was up, I imagine, at the end of the year. I guess he hadn't signed for the senior team. He'd been on the bench a few times. As I understand it, he was with the club in the United States when they came on their tour. So he did that. But I suspect he looked at the Arsenal squad as is and determined that there wasn't really going to be a place for him. Whereas United defensively is kind of a mess. So there's probably a lot of playing time for him in the relative near future. So Heaven is gone to United. We do wish him the best on a personal level, obviously, after United sells him to someone else. Hopefully on the continent. Hopefully we have a sell-on clause, and it's a very large fee that we get a piece of. But
I didn't know that's something that teams do.
Yeah, it's called the sell-on clause, where it's part of the negotiation. Where the idea is we're giving this guy up for a little bit, but we think he could still become something, and so you're negotiating for a portion of the price of the fee that the club gets if they sell him down the line.
So the idea is he gets to play for them a little bit, and if him playing gains him prestige and market value, and they then sell him, like we get a piece of it. That's kind of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, as partly as the development, because he came up through the academy, it's the kind of thing that's kind of makes sense to ask for. If he was just a player who had been here for we're thinking of more like a Declan Rice figure.
Yeah.
Someone who came in as a senior, or even a Trossard, right?
Right.
Trossard comes in as a senior player, and if we sell him to United, and we said, "Oh, we'd like a sell-on clause," and United would probably tell us to go pound sand, which would be fair, because they're not really, they're going to move him for any substantial money.
Yeah.
And the thing with the sell-on clause, of course, that's a thing teams have to think about when they sell players too, right? If we're going to sell him, we need the fee, the money we get for him needs to be high enough to account for the fact that a chunk of that change is going to this other team.
Right.
And so it's a kind of thing you would attach to a young player who perhaps could, be sold develop and be sold down the line, as opposed to an established senior player who if you sell it, I hate to pick on Declan Rice, but like a Trossard. If we were to sell Trossard, we'd be probably almost taking a loss, all things considered, because we acquired him as a senior player.
Right.
We'd be selling him as more of a bench piece, which of course means we wouldn't be recouping the original payment.
That makes sense.
But that's what the youth players are for, because they cost you nothing,
right?
At least in terms of the transfer market prices.
Right.
Other note, it was unofficially announced, I think is the way to say it. Kieran Tierney will be returning to Celtic at the end of the season. I think we all love Kieran Tierney, but I think he's a guy whose injuries kind of sapped his sort of ability to play. I don't know if it's his ability to play or his chances to play at this level. And you hope, he's Scottish, so going home to Celtic, which is where he played before he came to Arsenal. You hope that kind of comfort from being in a more familiar place, and maybe some good health allows him to sort of finish out his career in a positive way. He'll probably win the Scottish League 4 or 5 times with Celtic, and he'll get to play European football. So, hope that works out for him.
Cool. All right, so shifting gears again, we'll head back in time, baby. We'll go to Girona, I guess we're saying it, like Euros.
Girona? I don't actually know how you pronounce it.
My Girona. Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce it in Catalan, to be honest, but I don't know how to pronounce Catalan for the most part. So
Right. Well, yeah. So we closed out the. I'll say it for the last time. Champions League phase.
boom, there you go.
So we closed that out with a bang. We beat them 1-2. It was good. We cemented our place in the top 8.
I feel like calling it with a bang kind of overstates this game. It's
with a win.
It was more like one of those little fireworks that sort of at the end of a big show just kind of pop. Not one of the big booming ones, but just sort of a little pop. I mean, look, this was as close as you're going to get to what they call a dead rubber, right? A game that doesn't really have any real impact.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we don't know the other results of the game, the results of the other games when we started all 16 or however, no, not 16, 18, however many Champions League games, they all played on Wednesday. They all started at the same time. If every other result stayed the same, we would still be in the top 8 and finish it. Girona was eliminated before this game started. This was as close as you were going to get to a game that was effectively meaningless for both teams, which means it is as good a time as any for the debut of Neto. That's right. He played the whole game.
That is the best you can say about his performance in that game.
It was, I'll tell you what, he did have, and I know it's easy to pick on the guy a little bit, and he deserves some of it, but he did have a few good moments throughout. I think he was able to grow into the game a little bit. I mean, remember, this is a guy who hasn't played at all since what, August?
Right.
So I can be a little... I can be a little forgiving of his performance in general. And again, this is why he's playing against Girona, who is, as we've seen, I mean, obviously had a good season in Spain last year. I mean, but, they lost 7 of 8 games in the Champions League. They aren't very good. They aren't at this level. And yeah, we got what we needed from him for the most part. Most importantly, not picking up a red card.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that was not. That was one. This, of course, we're referring to the first Girona goal, where Partey has caught some criticism from us for his performances at right back, and this one isn't on Partey. Yes, he gets beat by the offensive player, but he's actually offside, except for Ricardo Calafiori, who actually plays him on because he's a step too deep. Which, by the way, semi-automated offside review.
Yeah,
I don't know. It took a goal. It took away a goal from both teams, and we lost. Calafiori had a goal early on. It was called back for offside again by a sliver, but he was offside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was overall. It was good. I think I may differ with you a little bit on the by the letter of the law application of offside. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it, this is definitely, if you're going to do it that way, if you're going to enforce it by a hair's width, at least make it very quick and very obvious how and why you called it. Like the graphics that they show are really cool. And I wish those were a little bit quicker. It'd be nice if they could show that along with the call instead of coming a few minutes later. And I don't know what part of it takes that long, but it's cool. It's nice that they're able to do that.
I mean, that's what they're looking at. I mean, it's the automated offside, so they're watching and they're making the review. I mean, yeah, I guess what I'd say is, look, unless you completely rewrite the offside rule, I think that's sort of the way it's going to be. And again, like, this to me is a vastly superior system than what you get in England with the slowed down video and the drawing the lines and everything. Right. And that's just, there's nothing. This is I mean, Calafiori was offside, and then the Girona player later in the second half, I don't remember because I'll be honest, I kind of stopped paying attention at a certain point because it was that kind of game. Yeah, he was offside, and it happens. And again, just the call came in quick. It was a quick decision. They had the graphic there. I mean, to me, that's what you want, and it's just kind of weirdly frustrating that a stadium that seats, 15,000, can somehow have this system running just fine, and yet all 20 Premier League clubs, or heck, what is it, 80 something in the English Football League, which I think was what they'd really want to really operate. Somehow that can't happen, and I just don't understand.
No,
I just don't understand.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but yeah. So yeah, they scored first. That was unfortunate. I mean, that was really the biggest moment where it wasn't the only one, but it was the biggest one where I was like, Neto, come on, man.
Yeah. I mean, really, there's the real problem, and then there's the potential problem. The real problem is he comes all the way out. I get it. You're kind of caught in between, and it's a split-second decision. You want to be able to challenge the shooter, but also you need to be in a position where you can still make a play on the ball. And then the ball comes in. He's of course out of reflex, but of course he's outside the box. Which, if he had touched the ball, means that's a straight red, and he's out of the game.
Right, which he didn't get to it, but he still missed entirely anyways and allowed the goals. So,
I have never been so happy to see the keeper not make a save in that instance. Let's just say that, especially given we should point out our backup keeper in the game was not David Raya. It was young Tommy Setford. Raya apparently had Arteta said there was a muscle thing or an injury of some kind. Now, how much of that is real and how much of that is, Manchester City on the weekend? I don't know. David Raya might not play. Who knows? And I don't know.
So I didn't know that. Okay, I was about to say, maybe it wouldn't have been the worst thing. You never want him to be forcibly taken out by red card, obviously. But kind of funny to think about if he had been, how the game might have gone differently, at least before that. But it would have been, the damage would have been done at that point. I mean, but I guess maybe not the goal though. But
it would have been. I mean, it's one of those that in that, given the circumstances, the way that played out, it's better that he scored, and we just it's fine
since we're able to make it up anyways. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about so many over the season, the last couple of years, right? How many marginal penalty calls? Was it a penalty? Was it not a penalty? You saw two stone cold penalties in this game. I mean,
yeah.
We'll start with the one here that gives us the goal. I mean, he just trips it. I don't.
Yeah.
He just sticks his, there's no. Just stick his leg out and took out Thomas Partey.
Very, very blatant. And, this is the one that we converted with Jorginho. That was Jorginho was a less puzzling call, I will say, to take a penalty kick.
I was a little surprised to see Jorginho.
A little, except they did explain how he has a very high success ratio, I guess, with taking penalties. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of. Sure, it worked, so I'm not going to complain too much. And he's obviously solid at taking penalties. But
it was not the most expert kick, though. I mean, we were lucky that it went in. The keeper went the right way, and it was just barely. I think his finger might have graced it a little bit or something. It was just barely. The keeper might have done better and been able to get that.
Yeah,
but.
I mean, but that's the thing with goals. They all count the same, whether you squeeze it in past the fingers, or if you're Ethan Wanyeri, you just say, I'm going to do my best Bukayo Saka impression and just leather it in the box. That was fun. He's so good. He is really talented.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's going to go on about Lewis-Skelly and his performance this week, and they should. He was awesome, in both games. But, man, this Wanyeri kid is special. He could be really special.
It's one of those things that's kind of funny. So much of this is new to me. And, I remember when they brought him out the first time. It's the first time I'd ever seen someone young getting a run out. And it was almost a stunt for him to set the record for the Premier League because he was 5 days younger than the previous youngest or something like that. But, I can see in retrospect now there was something that Arteta saw in him and wanted to give him that early opportunity, that early exposure to getting out there on the big field, having his name out there, I can see that now. It makes more sense.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about this too. I mean, Arteta's not a guy who does things for the sake of doing them. There's a reason for doing it. And a lot of it is look, you you performed well in training. I mean, he wants to you want to be able to sell to youth players, like we see Heaven being sold there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want the youth players to know there is a way for you to get into the team. It's not just it is a meritocracy. It isn't just about your I said superiority. It's about your seniority. That was the word. Isn't just about your seniority. It's you have a chance if you perform well, if you do the things I ask you to, you'll get on the field. And he did. Yeah, clearly was doing the things that Arteta was asking him, and it's a message to him, but also to a lot of the other academy players, the young guys at Arsenal. If you do what we're telling you, and you reach that level, and let's be fair, I mean, the level he has to be at to be performing with this team is pretty good,
World class, basically. Yeah,
he's off to a heck of a start, and and it's nice that it's you could talk about the performance, and we can sort of see the way certain players perform throughout different games, but for his performances to be sort of get the exclamation point of that goal, and that goal that he scores, so nice.
Yeah, definitely. And the rest of the match, there wasn't really a whole lot to talk about. I mean, I guess a couple things I wanted to run by you. I mean, we saw a yellow card to Raheem Sterling in the 70th minute for diving. Do you recall your opinion of that?
I thought the dive was a little harsh. I mean, he goes down kind of easy, but it could just easily been a slip. I mean, I get why they give out yellows for diving. They do feel those are one that really do feel kind of inconsistent. Like, is it a dive? Is it not a dive? I mean, sometimes they're fairly obvious, but you see nothing called. I don't know. I don't love the call, but I also I never really know with diving yellows. That's really my answer. I don't know.
Speaking of Raheem Sterling, whose idea was it for him to take that second penalty? Like, I when they showed him, I was like, what? Why?
Well, to me, that actually wasn't a big surprise. I mean, first off, again, like, the penalty itself, like, you just want to tuck to the defender. What are you doing? What is that all about?
Yeah.
Again, two, like, painfully obvious penalties given in this game. I mean, I understood that for Sterling. I mean, at this point, this has already come in stoppage time, so the game's kind of over at this point. And so at that point, like, I mean, we've seen them do this before. We saw it with Havertz, with Odegaard. Like, you give the ball to a player and basically who's begging for a goal, and give him a chance to get the goal, give him a chance to score, and kind of get on the score sheet, build his confidence, all of that good stuff. The downside of that is apparently throughout his career, Sterling has not been a very good penalty taker. and it showed, unfortunately. It showed, unfortunately, and I mean, we ended up with another chance or two in before the game was out. But I think that was one of those, like, and that probably is a players on the field making that call, like, try and get an easy one, get the layup, and just sort of get yourself going. And no, I guess not.
Instead, it may have made things worse.
I mean, I don't know if you can make it too much worse. I think the real problem is Sterling is just kind of, he's a bit cooked, as we've talked about. Like, I just don't know that you feel for the guy, and he's had a long career. He's won a bunch of stuff. We did laugh since we were talking about the City game. He came on for Havertz, and someone pointed out as they're coming off and says, "Wow, those are two guys who were super thrilled to not be at Chelsea right now."
Yeah, really.
But yeah, but in the end, we won. A good performance in the Champions League, 6 wins, a draw, and a loss. And the loss was to Inter Milan, who basically finished right with us in the standings, who conceded 1 goal. In 8 games, Inter Milan scored 11 and conceded 1, which is like the most Italian European line possible.
Yeah, which, hey, that was us, right?
I mean, we scored a few more, but we had a very good defensive record overall. Finished in 3rd, although, as we said, it kind of matters for seeding, but doesn't really matter. It does in a little way, but also not entirely. But anyway, we made it through, and we're on to the knockout rounds.
Yeah, definitely. One random observation or question. So it was kind of funny. Throughout the match, they would show Girona's keeper, and I think, where do I know him from? And it dawned on me at one point that I think I was just mistaking him for, I'm blanking on the actor's first name. Is it Michael Fassbender?
Oh yeah.
Um, he's been in a bunch of stuff. Did you notice that at all? Did the keeper remind you of him?
Um, I can't say it really registered with me at all. I'm not saying you're
Yeah.
wrong. I'm just saying that didn't really particularly register with
Yeah.
me. But maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
I've
only
seen
so
a
many
bunch of stuff
faces
that
in the
he's in
world.
recently. Yeah.
There's only so many faces in the world. I mean, it could very well be.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the Champions League draw happened a couple days later. So what's that looking like for us?
Right. So recall that we are in one of two positions on the bracket, depending on how this plays out, but also potentially playing different sides. So what I didn't realize was that the draw from last Friday was only for the first knockout round, and not the round of 16, which is where we are. That draw will come in February, after the first the knockout phase is done. So at this point, what we know is that we will be in one of two positions on the bracket, and we're going to be drawn with Inter Milan, and one of us will be in one slot, and one will be the other. And then each of us will face the winner of either. Hold on, I was just looking at it. We will face the winner of either Juventus and PSV Eindhoven, or Feyenoord and AC Milan.
Okay.
So either an Italian or a Dutch side. But other than that, I mean, again, if you're picking your opponents, you'd kind of prefer one of the Dutch teams, as opposed to having to face one of the Italians. But at the same time, like both Juventus and Milan are both kind of off their typical standard. Italian sides in the knockout round of a tournament is always a dicey proposition because of how strong they generally are defensively. They certainly have talent on their rosters, but then again, like Amy Lawrence made this point, I think last week, I think on Handbrake Off or somewhere else, like Arsenal, Liverpool, and Barcelona are top 3 in the Champions League and top 2 in their own leagues. Everybody else has problems. Yes, they've got problems, but we don't really have problems. Like everyone else in Europe would give anything to be in the position that one of those 3 teams is in. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really matter who we get in the next round. We should be the favorites, and we should feel good about our chances to go deep in this tournament.
Yeah, no, it's looking like it. That's encouraging.
Yeah, so we're going to play. So yeah, by the way, the round of 16, our first game will be in the first week of March, and then the second week of March will be the second leg, which will be at home. Other than that, we'll find out in a couple of weeks in late February, looking at a calendar, in about 2 weeks. No, in about 2.5 weeks, we'll find out who we're going to play in the next round. And the nice thing is we don't have to play midweek games for a couple of weeks after this week, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, definitely. And next week, completely off. So hopefully they head to Dubai or wherever and recharge and rest and recuperate, heal, whatever things they need to do. Take advantage.
I'd heard a rumor about Saudi Arabia this year, or just somewhere, I don't think they even necessarily need to go do the training thing. I think just an opportunity to get away for a couple of days. By the way, Manchester City did qualify for the knockout stages. They're going to play Real Madrid, so that'll be fun for someone. Us for watching.
Yeah, right. They ended up in 23rd or 22nd, like just barely getting in.
Officially 22nd. They had to beat Club Brugge in their final game. They did, and so they did what they had to do. But yeah, they have been struggling for several months, and that's just, it's been a struggle for them. So we'll kind of see how that plays out for them. They're talented. They certainly are talented, but we'll see what happens against Real, a team that always manages always finds a way to get a result in the Champions League.
That'll be interesting to watch. You mentioned there was some news in the MLS this week. What's going on there?
Yeah, so two interesting stories, which we don't have time to get into too deeply. The season is starting in a couple of weeks. But two of them, one, MLS and U.S. Soccer were in court, actually being sued by the recently folded North American Soccer League, the NASL. This is not the original NASL from the 70s that had, where Pele and others played, other big name players in that era. No, this was a more recent league that basically sued MLS and U.S. Soccer. They said for conspiring to something about the designation as the Tier 1 league and sort of the American soccer pyramid. They sued them for a bunch of money, and apparently this week the verdict came out and they lost. That they were not unfairly treated. They had a lot of internal financial problems. Some of the people involved in the league, at least one of their major investors, was a pretty shady character, and so I'm not surprised they lost, but it was an interesting sort of story floating around out there, and in terms of the structure of U.S. soccer and how there are some, at least were for a while, some uncomfortably close relationships between U.S. soccer and MLS, which have since sort of been pulled apart. But at least in terms of restricting the competition in regards to NASL, I think the legal opinion, which seems to be more accurate, is that NASL killed themselves. Basically, they were just not a well enough run league relative to MLS and all of that. The other interesting note, which again, speaking of things that are vastly more complicated, I still don't quite understand it. MLS came out with an announcement late last week, some point last week, about cup competitions. Of course, they have the MLS season, 34 games, half home, half away, Supporter Shield, postseason, MLS Cup, all that. They also have the concurrent tournaments, including, deep breath now, the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is the North American Club Championship. You have the U.S. Open Cup, a knockout tournament. You have the Leagues Cup, a tournament between the MLS and Liga MX that we've seen in the summer. The Canadian Championship for the Canadian teams, obviously. And then also the Club World Cup this summer, which will include the Seattle Sounders and Inter Miami. I don't quite understand all of it, but what MLS decided to do was they created qualification standards for all of the different cups and basically said you're only going to play in 2 cup competitions unless you're in the Club World Cup, because that doesn't count, so you can do that one anyway. We've included a link because it got to the only thing that actually I cared about, which is where are the clubs I follow, where are they going to play? Again, as a first day supporter of New York City, but also living here in Houston and following the Dynamo. Both of those clubs will compete in the U.S. Open Cup and Leagues Cup. Some teams will be in Leagues Cup and some teams, the Canadian clubs are doing their own thing. Some teams will be in Leagues Cup only, or rather, some teams will be in the U.S. Open Cup only. It was very complicated, but the point is they're trying to limit fixture congestion. They're trying to limit fixture congestion, so you're only going to be in 2 cup competitions this year, and they basically announced 2 qualified for which one.
Huh.
So go look at the graphics and find your club. That's what you need.
Yeah, basically.
I can't explain it anymore.
And before we get into what's up next week, let's just give listeners and viewers a bit of a note of as far as what's up for us in the next week, which is we may not be able to convene and do another episode for next week. So it may be a Gunnar U vacation along with a Gunnar vacation. We'll see how that ends up going. But ultimately, between now and when we plan to record, it's really only the reverse fixture for the Carabao Cup, and either we made it through and it's amazing, or we didn't, and we'll cover that when we get back, whenever we do. So,
yep.
So meanwhile, what's up for Arsenal for next week?
You spoiled my little bit here at the end. Yeah, Wednesday, second leg of the Carabao Cup semifinals. We will be at Newcastle United up at St. James's Park at Newcastle upon Tyne. I just like to say the whole name sometimes. That game will be on Paramount Plus. We trail 2-0 on aggregate. we have every reason to feel kind of confident. Obviously, we're coming in off a good result, off of several good results. We've been playing well. We're getting a little bit healthier overall. We also know that we have a break coming up, which, can sometimes let you can push a little harder knowing that you're about to get some rest. You don't have to save yourself for a game 3 days later. And Newcastle has been struggling as of late. They have not been in good form since they beat us back in the first leg a couple of weeks ago. So, this is one where a lot of the commentary suggests this. I think it's fair. I think the first goal will matter a lot. I think if they get the first goal, I think it's done and dusted. It's probably over. Well, we gave a good effort, and it sucks to go out, but when we lose the first leg at home 2-0, you kind of know that's coming. I think if we get the first goal, I think things get very nervy for them. So, again, St. James's Park is a place we have struggled in recent years, but then again, the Emirates was a place they had struggled, and they won 2-0. So, I felt very confident going into the City game this weekend. I did think there was I'm surprised at exactly how it played out, but I did think there was a chance we could get a pretty good result. I feel confident about this one too, but there's kind of I guess it's being down 2 goals at this point. It is kind of like we have nothing to lose. Either we have a dramatic comeback or we go out, which is always most likely when you're down 2-0 going on the road. So we'll see what happens there. And then we get 10 days off, and who doesn't like that?
In a severe break from format, it has just come to my attention. We did not choose player of the week.
Oh, yeah, we didn't. I mean...
So who is your player of the week?
Oh, gosh. I guess on some level I should say all of them, but I'm going to pick a guy. I mean, it's interesting because we actually did rotate a fair amount, and we talked about how many guys were good in the City game, how many guys had good moments and good play in the Girona game. I'm going to say Declan Rice, who got a lot of run out in both games. I think he's just been just a good player for us all around. He just sort of filled that secondary captain spot. In a lot of ways, he's a leader on the field as well, on and off the field. I actually, say he only came on for Jorginho in that game. Actually, as I'm looking, Martin Odegaard played 90 minutes. I'm going to switch. I'm going to say Odegaard.
Oh boy,
Odegaard played because I was trying to think of. I was trying to think in my head. I'll say this. I was trying to think in my head a player who actually played a good chunk of both games, and I was just looking at the Girona game in particular because I didn't remember it. A lot of guys were rotated in and out. So no, I changed my mind. I'm going to say Martin Odegaard. But you could say just about anybody. I thought we were good. This was a very good week for us.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm fond of breaking the rules that I make for myself with Player of the Week. And one thing I don't think I've ever quite done, and I don't know if I can fully bring myself to do it this week, but who I'd really like to pick is Mikel Arteta. For him to get that performance out of this team in its current state against Manchester City is truly remarkable. To have Miles Lewis-Skelly and Thomas Partey and Kai Havertz and Odegaard, to have all those people who we don't necessarily think of, who haven't always been in the best form lately, to have the whole team perform so well for that entire match and really shame them, to really rub it in the way that we did. I would love to pick Arteta, but I am going to limit myself to actual players of Arsenal for this week. And I'm actually going to pick Thomas Partey. I think, we are often critical of him. I think when he messes up, we are quick to call him on it. But he had a really good week. He was subbed off at halftime or near the half, I think, in the Girona match. But he was good in that first half. He impressed me multiple times against Girona, some good plays. And then all throughout the City match, I talked about this when we were talking about the City match, he was there intercepting passes, making things happen. And then the goal that really was the real turning point for that match came from him. It was just a really outstanding week. So,
yeah. I do think if we're picking man of the match for both of these games, I think he probably would be my pick for the City game overall. But yeah, he had a good week. Other guys had good weeks.
he was in my notes for Girona, like even
Mm,
before the City match. Like he has stood out to me this week, independently of what ended up happening, how the weekend did. So yeah.
mhm. That's a good choice. I mean, I think Arteta would be a fair choice too, because we've done that on occasion. But yeah, I think he's. I think Partey had a very good week too.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to click the like button on one of our videos. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about, which it was a lot this week, and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Stay humble, everyone.